So when trouble comes, when those days of darkness occur, sometimes we respond with fear. Let's look at another response. In 1 Kings 19, at the end of verse 4 there, Elijah has gone out into the desert now at this point. It says he came to a broom tree and sat down under it and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, Get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. Second common reaction to difficult times and trouble in life is depression. You know, Elijah is obviously depressed here. He's scared. He runs away into the desert. Wouldn't you be depressed too? He did something good, something that should honor God. He worked hard at it, and the response he got is someone threatened his life. Really makes you want to give up. And he has all the symptoms of depression here. He eats and sleeps excessively. Now maybe that's because of his intense journey, but he gives us one telltale sign of a depression, and he wishes that his life would end. In other words, he's saying, I've done what I could, it wasn't good enough, and now I want to give up. But even when Elijah's depressed, God doesn't give up on him. He sends an angel to provide food for him. He tells him to keep going, encourages him. And when Elijah's completely down, God helps to carry him along. You see, depression happens. It's another normal part of life. We live in a world where bad things happen, and when bad things happen, when those days of darkness occur, sometimes we feel very depressed. And it's natural. Even David was depressed when he wrote some of his Psalms. He wrote in Psalm 38:8, I'm feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. Depression happens. It's natural. But although it's natural, there is danger in the excess of depression. Did you know that over 18 million Americans have some form, some kind of depression? And did you know that the fastest growing, the highest growing market for antidepressants right now is preschoolers? Preschool kids, they're supposed to be worried about catching cooties, not worried about the problems of life. We are fighting a losing battle against depression. Now, I think there's various reasons why people tend to be so depressed. I think a lot of people try to live for things that they shouldn't, and they realize it's an empty lifestyle. Sometimes they look for help in the wrong places, but sometimes people just get depressed simply because the world we live in is a depressing place. Our world is pretty messed up, and there's a lot of things to be depressed about. But I want everyone in here to know and understand this, okay? Do not leave this building today unless you know this. It is not wrong and it is not shameful to feel depressed. It's not wrong at all. It happens, but it is not meant to rule our lives. Philippians 4:4 says, Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. The problem with depression is that it can slowly start to drown out our joy. Certain things repel other things. Depression can repel the rejoicing that we could be doing in the Lord. When I've been outside and I've been working and cutting grass and weed eating and I smell sweaty and I smell like gasoline and I come inside, I know I'm not supposed to sit right next to Bree on the couch because certain things repel other things. Depression can repel our joy. But what's the Bible's answer to depression? What's the Bible's response to it? Well, I need to get this out of the way first. There are certain degrees of depression, certain things about depression that need to be handled, maybe something to do with a chemical imbalance in the mind that need to be handled with professional therapy. But for that common nagging depression that results from the problems in life, we are given some biblical answers. Proverbs 17:22 says, A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Well, some people may say, how can I be cheerful if I'm depressed? Well, it's really a matter of what we focus on. If you focus on the positive and try to be cheerful, it will at least help. I think a lot of times depression comes because we focus a lot on ourselves and on our own problems. So in contrast, try to focus mostly on Christ and on others. Granted, that won't solve all your problems and all the things that are causing you to feel depressed, but when you focus on Christ and others, you focus on what's most important, it does more for your problems than worry will. So when those difficult times in life come, and they do come, sometimes we are afraid. Sometimes we feel depressed. Let's look at one more response to the troubles in life. In 1 Kings 19, verse 13. Now at this point, Elijah has gone through the desert. He spent 40 days traveling 150 miles. Only 150 miles in 40 days. He's gone to Mount Horeb to meet with God. This is where he hears, he's waiting for God, and there's a fire, and there's a strong wind, and there's an earthquake, and God's not in any of those. And then he hears a whisper. And when he hears the whisper, he goes out to meet God. And so in 1 Kings 19:13, we're told, when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword." And now look at what he says next. "I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." The last response to the troubles in life, to the difficulties in life, is very commonly is loneliness. A lot of times, people just feel alone. Elijah's gone all the way to Mount Horeb. He meets with God, and he gives this basic complaint: "I've done what you wanted me to, and now I'm all alone, and my life is in danger." He has reason to feel alone. He's tried to do what God wanted him to. He's tried to honor God. He got run out of his own country for fear of his life, and now he's been wandering in the desert for over a month. Of course he feels alone. When something bad happens, it's natural to feel that way. Maybe when family or friends pass away, you feel like you're left all alone. Maybe when you have a financial problem, you feel like it's your problem and your problem alone. Or when you have fights and arguments with people that you love, you feel like they're against you and you're all alone. And Elijah felt like he was all alone because he was in the desert for so long by himself. The days of darkness are very, very lonely. But God has an answer to our feelings of loneliness. And God gives this answer to Elijah in 1 Kings 19, verse 18. He tells him, "I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have never bowed down to Baal." In other words, God says, "I've got 7,000 people following me in Israel. You're not alone. You have the support of all of my people." And even though Elijah seems to overlook it, he hasn't been alone at all the entire time, because he's had God with him. When he ran out into the desert, went over 100 miles away from home, crossed into a different country, went out into the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, and he fell asleep out there, God made him food and had a lunch for him ready. God will not leave you alone. I can tell you the time I felt most alone in my life. Right after I graduated college, I had lived there for 4 years. I never even went home during the summers. I just stayed at college. It became my home over those 4 years. And while I was there, I lived there. I got used to it. And when I graduated, I didn't really have a place to go. I guess I was technically homeless. And so I left an empty campus with just a few things in my car. And I went to a friend's house, and he let me stay at his apartment. I was talking to Randy at the time about coming here to meet with you guys and to do a trial sermon here. But I had gone to a friend's apartment, and he let me stay there, but he wasn't even there. He was gone on business. I was there all alone. I ended up going to my dad's place for a little while, but my dad was in Alaska on a business trip, and I was there mostly alone. I felt pretty lonely during that time. But you know, I look back on it, and I really wasn't alone, because I had a lot of people who cared about me and who were helping me. A friend who maybe wasn't right beside me, he was letting me use his apartment. And he was supporting me and taking care of me. I had friends in Illinois who were offering to let me move into their basement. I could go and I could stay with my in-laws, my future in-laws at that time. It was right before me and Bree got married. And I know I wasn't alone because I know I had God with me. Because throughout that time, I'm convinced God was taking care of me and providing for me. Because when I did come here and do that trial sermon, I left thinking, I've got a good feeling about this place. God was taking care of me. Even when I was at my absolute most lonely, I was not really alone. God's answer to our times, our feelings of loneliness, is that we're not really alone. So if you are going through a difficult time right now in your life, if you are feeling like you may be all alone, I want you to know you have a church family who cares about you, and they are here to help you. And if you're not going through a difficult time right now, maybe things couldn't be better. Maybe your life is perfect. You need to know that you have brothers and sisters who may be going through difficult times. And we are called to be the comfort that they need. Romans 12:15 says we rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And also know this, you are never really alone if you have God. Matthew 28, into verse 20. Right before Jesus left and went into heaven and left his disciples all alone on earth to build the entire church by themselves, last thing he told them was, "Surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." We're not really alone. In short, bad things happen. It's part of life. Days of darkness occur, and when they do, sometimes we're afraid, Sometimes we feel depressed. Sometimes we feel like we're lonely, but we are never really alone. If you understand anything from this, I want you to know that God takes care of us in the midst of our troubles. God is there for us.